How do our psychological conceptions of good and evil influence the shape of our law? Law is often framed as a system of rules, procedures, and institutions designed to maintain order and administer justice. But beneath its formal codes lie deeper questions. What is justice? What makes something wrong or right? How should we respond to harm? These are not only legal questions, they are psychological ones. They concern how human beings experience wrongdoing, process conflict, and seek restoration. The classic moral exhortation from Romans, "Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good," can serve as a powerful psychological heuristic. It does not just offer ethical advice, it outlines a process of transformation. To be overcome by evil is to let harm dictate our responses. To overcome evil with good is to introduce something new, something integrative, healing, and constructive. This psychological movement, from reaction to reflection, from fragmentation to integration, mirrors the ideal function of law itself. Through this lens, law becomes more than a structure of control. It becomes a system for navigating human experience, regulating reactivity, and fostering coherence within society. To explore how this plays out, we examine several major psychological models. Freud's structural theory, Jung's depth psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, temporal integration, and humanistic existential approaches, each offering a distinct map of how good and evil are understood internally, and how those understandings shape systems of justice externally. At its core, Freud's theory of the psyche presents a dynamic tension between raw instinct, the ID, internalized norms, the superego, and the rational mediator, the ego. These psychic structures can be seen reflected in the architecture of law itself. In the legal sphere, the ID corresponds to unregulated impulses, anger, revenge, self-interest, that law must contain. The superego reflects society's ideals and prohibitions, enshrined in codes, customs, and moral expectations. The ego, then, is the domain of courts, legal reasoning, and procedural fairness, the mediating force that reconciles human desire with social order. When individuals or institutions are overcome by evil, Freud's model helps us understand how law may fail to mediate properly between drive and duty. Conversely, overcoming evil with good becomes a task of ethical mediation, channeling instinct through judgment, restoring balance, and affirming human dignity through legal rationality. Jung's model expands our understanding of good and evil beyond moral binaries into the realm of the unconscious. The shadow contains those aspects of ourselves, anger, shame, desire, but also creativity and power, that we repress or project onto others. When unacknowledged, the shadow can erupt in personal or collective destructiveness. The legal system frequently becomes the arena where the shadow is externalized. Crime, accusation, punishment, all reflect projections of unintegrated aspects of the psyche onto others. Laws that respond to crime solely through condemnation risk reinforcing fragmentation, both within individuals and across society. To overcome evil with good, from a Jungian perspective, means fostering integration rather than exclusion. Legal systems informed by depth psychology seek not merely to punish the shadow's expression, but to bring it into dialogue with the whole, through restorative justice, therapeutic jurisprudence, and the cultivation of insight. Cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, offers a more empirical, action-oriented model of how thought, emotion, and behavior form self-reinforcing cycles. When someone is harmed, distorted beliefs like "I am powerless" or "the world is dangerous" can lead to fear or rage, which then fuel destructive behaviors. And these behaviors reinforce the original beliefs. Legal systems, when designed without attention to these psychological loops, may unintentionally reinforce harm, punishing reactive behavior without transforming the distorted perceptions behind them. But CBT-informed legal thinking supports intervention points, ways to break the cycle through education, rehabilitation, and value-based decision-making. In this model, to overcome evil with good is to intervene consciously, to disrupt automatic loops of harm with intentional choices aligned with long-term human flourishing. Law thus becomes not just reactive, but reformatory, reshaping patterns of thought and behavior through structured, value-aligned systems. Trauma and injustice do not exist only in isolated moments. They unfold over time, often binding individuals and communities to past wounds. Legal responses, therefore, must contend not only with the facts of what happened, but with the psychological timeline in which that harm is lived and relived. Therapeutic and narrative approaches emphasize the human capacity to re-narrate the past in the light of the present and future. Law, in this view, becomes a storytelling structure, a way of reframing injury, reasserting agency, and opening the possibility of new outcomes. To overcome evil with good here is to transform the meaning of harm through present action. Courts, legal narratives, reparations, and public apologies are not merely symbolic. They are narrative acts of reintegration, enabling people to author futures that are not dictated by injury. Existential and humanistic psychology center the individual's capacity for awareness, choice, and integration. Here, good and evil are not merely behaviors to reward or punish, but existential orientations, ways of being in relationship to self, others, and meaning. Law, from this angle, can either fragment or integrate. Systems that reduce people to cases, numbers, or labels risk dehumanizing them. But systems that support awareness, compassion, and responsibility affirm human dignity and invite transformation. In this view, to overcome evil with good is to meet human suffering not with judgment or avoidance, but with presence and agency. It means building legal frameworks that honor the person, not just the rule, structures that cultivate responsibility without shame, and justice without alienation. Across these models, a consistent insight emerges. Legal systems do not merely reflect social order, they are expressions of human psychology. Whether mediating impulse and restraint, Freud, integrating shadow and persona, Jung, interrupting maladaptive cycles, CBT, reauthoring wounded narratives, temporal integration, or affirming authentic selfhood, humanistic psychology, law shapes and is shaped by the way we experience good and evil internally. To be overcome by evil is to be trapped in trauma, impulse, projection, or despair. To overcome evil with good is to introduce coherence, intention, and transformation. This is not merely a moral imperative, it is a design principle, for minds, for relationships, and for law. Legal systems rooted in this psychological wisdom do more than restrain harm. They cultivate the conditions under which healing, responsibility, and societal integration become possible. In this sense, the call to overcome evil with good becomes a profound blueprint, not just for individual lives, but for the systems that hold our shared moral and legal worlds together.